Welcome back to Journey for the PlayStation 4. In this part we're sort of going into this new place that looks quite visually different from the places we've had up to this point. Like, we've had the sort of gold at the last part. We've had, the browns and the sort of pink kind of tones going on in the earlier chapters before that. And now this is quite a harsh jump. And if you think in terms of like typical colour theory, which I don't properly understand, I'm not an artist, I don't really look in much depth in that, but I know that this is kind of like the binary opposite in terms of like colour tones and that, because the golds, the pinks, the browns and that, they're all traditionally warm colours. They give off this sort of vibe of warmth and comfort, and they're very easy to settle yourself into. Whereas this, like the shiny blue, this is more of a cold colour. And although this is still set around that kind of desert area, like you can still see there's the sand on the floor, and can see that like it's not that far out, it's just like sort of an inside equivalent of where we were. The entire change of pace with the colour tone, it kind of represents a tipping point or like transition point for the journey that we're on. And if you're looking at this from a more like artistic representation kind of standpoint, you could very much see the changing tone from a warm colour to a cold colour as being representative of the part where like we start to get more difficulty coming in. Not necessarily game difficulty, although there is a little bit of that coming up, but more in terms of like along the ride of this journey that we're on. Like, the starting point is easy, but eventually you're going to meet hardships along the way, and so the cold colours could represent that it's not easy going anymore. It's not this comfortable, warm, like cozy journey that you're on anymore. Now it's like there's hardships coming, there's going to be some difficulties to overcome. And colour just does a really good job of conveying things like that, I've always found. And it's a thing that like a lot of art pieces that go for this kind of narrative will try to do, because like not even with this kind of narrative, but like art in general, when you're easing someone into something, you have very friendly looking areas. Like, maybe if it's not a desert thing like this game, you might have grassland areas, you might have like maybe a lagoon, or just something that's not quite that imposing. But then once you're a bit further in and more serious things are starting to happen, that's when it will move into, there'll either be a harsh cold section like this, where like maybe there's lots of empty spaces, or it feels a bit lonely, or, there'll just be this whole cold feeling about it, something foreboding. Or they'll go the complete other way and start foreboding danger, and they might have some harsh reds, or like maybe some dark blacks, and that's how some other things would choose colour. And this is the kind of thing that I kind of wish I had more of a mind for this sort of thing, because this kind of telling of a narrative is something that I've always personally appreciated, even if I don't completely understand. It's like a thing that I sort of passively take in, and yes, that didn't actually get me on my first playthrough, but when I went back through to record it, I did actually get a bit of a jump from that, just because I completely forgot that he barges his way out of the sand at that point. But yes, when I've been talking about like the incoming danger, things like him are basically what I'm getting at, because these things, I don't know what they're explicitly meant to be. I think this is another thing that they're deliberately leaving vague so you can interpret whatever you want from it. But it's that thing that is symbolic for a hardship, at least to my interpretation. It's like, this could be switched out with anything that might be a sign of difficulty or a sign of challenge. Like, this is the standing piece for it, and yeah, they can actually hurt you if they catch you. I think that's going to happen once here, but it's going to demonstrate right now. It just sort of swoops in, like, in for the kill, so to say. Like, they can't actually kill you, like, there's no sort of game over state in this game, but, like, it gives you enough of a nudge that it's like, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should be intimidated by these things that just sort of harshly swoop in on me. But yeah, it's like almost instinctive once you've been shown what to do. It's like good conveyance here that you see him swooping on those little scarves that were flying about. And so you know that you should, instead of going down the middle, when you see his little light taking a look out, trying to find you, trying to scout you out, that maybe you should go along the darker sections, and it's that kind of like the darkness is safety because he can't see you, whereas his searchlights, like, that was actually quite effective. Like, he still couldn't see me because I was under that, but like that little light reflecting off me just for like a couple of seconds there, that was enough to think, okay, I'm not safe, I need to find somewhere else. And especially with him right overhead, like we see right now, it's well done tension in my eyes. It's the sort of thing that, although, like I say, this game has no game over state. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna get caught. Yeah, like, he's seen me, and there's that a few seconds there, but that's enough to hurt me. Like, look at that. Like, like I say, there's no game over state, but I'm now crippled for a little bit. I'm going to limp around for a little way until there I'll get back on my feet again. And it's that sort of thing where there's no actual punishment, but it's still enough of a threat without it. And that feels quite odd to try to explain, but I think it's the sort of thing that when you're in control of a character who's going through a situation like this, it just sort of clicks. It's like you know exactly how that character is feeling. And so when it's also the kind of character who is very vague in his or her design, like the Traveller here. Oh, I'm getting caught again. Did I make it past? Will I make it? I can't actually remember, but I think I might make it to safety here. Yeah. I just got there. Like, you see what I mean? That's the sort of tension that this situation can get there. And to carry on from what I was going with before that thing really interrupted me, like, when you've got this kind of character who is very vague, it's like you can project yourself onto the character if you so desire. And that, in a way, that does make these perceived threats feel even more of a threat or even more of a danger. I gotta say, the overlaid thunder effects here are sort of complementing the idea of we're having more hardships along the way now. It's like another thing that's perceived threatening. But listen to that music right now. This game's soundtrack is absolutely beautiful for what it is. This was composed by Austin Wintory, who would later on go to do the music in Abzu. And I think both games have absolutely fantastic soundtracks that complement what happens on screen brilliantly. I don't know if I have a favourite soundtrack between the two. Like, I remember more from the Abzu soundtrack, but I think that's because I've played it first. I haven't spent as much time with Journey yet as I have with Abzu, so the music hasn't had that same time to grow on me. Although I can see it being one of those soundtracks that over time I go back to listen to as my sort of chill out music, which I'll do sometimes. I sometimes do like to just have music that I listen to, like maybe just if I'm trying to wind down, if it's in the evening and I want to relax. And sometimes I do like to put on some video game music for that. There's also other soundtracks that maybe not as flat out relaxing, but because I've got the association of them with the games they come from, and I can sort of just get in the mood of what the music's conveying to me, and it has a similar kind of effect. The other one that comes to mind for a more narrative driven game with a great soundtrack is the Everybody's Gone to the Rapture soundtrack. And that, it's kind of hard to describe what it is. Like, a lot of the music is very sort of churchy, you know, that kind of tone to it. Like, there's this one song on there in particular, Frank's theme, Carry Me Back to Her Arms, which is just so powerful, but it also gets me into that mind. But this particular set piece here, we're going to be sort of climbing up, and I'm not sure what this is that we're raising as we go. Like, this, it looks like a kind of gas that's around, but like it's a non-lethal gas, but we can sort of float very easily in it. Like, it might have something to do with like the things that are glowing, like off of these scarf pieces that we're using to fly. I'm not entirely sure exactly what's going on here, and I will say this is probably a slightly less memorable set piece to me from this game compared to, like, say, you know, that glowing gold outside desert part, or even like the cold inside part that we were just in. Like, this maybe isn't quite as impactful on me, but at the end of the day, it's Journey. Like, there's always going to be one scene that's never going to live up to some of the other fantastic things that we've seen, and also some of the fantastic things that we will see. Because, oh yeah, there is like a lot of beautiful stuff left to see, even though this is like the second to last part of the playthrough. Although it is, in a way, it's kind of cool to see the ribbon or the scarf taking different shapes as well. It's like a constant along the journey, but also adapting to fit the different segments of it. I guess, like, it's kind of a weird thing to process properly, but like, sometimes seeing familiar pieces but used in different contexts does add that feeling of progression to your adventure. And like, this is admittedly quite cool. Again, it does still stay in this part of me of not being quite as impactful as other parts of the game, but in a way, and I do almost feel bad about making the comparison to Sonic Adventure again, like I did in the sort of sliding down the desert section. But like, it sort of reminds me of the snake part from Lost World in Sonic Adventure, in that it's like bobbing up and down and you sort of ride on the back of it. And I should probably elaborate on like why I feel bad about that, because like, I obviously really like Sonic Adventure and I like the tone that that game has, but it's so staunchly different to what we have right now. And when we have these kind of peaceful, or at least peacefully conveyed stories, it almost becomes a bit of a sacred cow for me. Like, at the end of the day, I realise that it is very much still a video game, and it's a video game experience, and I'm talking over it like I talk over lots of other games. But in a way, I feel like there's this unwritten rule of respect that I carry for a game like this. And so comparing it to like maybe the cool dude with the attitude Sonic Adventure, maybe that is undermining that a little bit. It's, you know, it's just like feelings that this game's giving to me, and it's quite hard to explain. And you know, that is one thing that I have always, I wouldn't say struggled with, but always kept in mind when I cover games like this, in that I want to be very respectful of the tone the game itself shows off. Because like, if I were like laughing and joking over this like I do with like Sonic and Mega Man and stuff like that. I feel like that would do a poor job of conveying what this game is about. And so I treat it a little bit more specially, almost a bit more carefully. And like there's stuff like this that I almost don't want to talk over at all. I want to just sort of soak it in. I'm not sure if I'm noticing it now or whether is something that's happening, but I feel like that white figure that we see in these little hallucination scenes, I want to say, or meditation scenes, I feel like the size is very inconsistent. Like it feels like he was a lot more impactful there than us. Like he was a lot more prominent, he was much taller. And that might just be clever use of the camera, but I feel like they are doing something intentionally there. But we've had the threat from the colour, but there you see it looks like our figure, our traveller, is struggling towards the end of his journey there. And that could be foreshadowing. But also, depending on your outlook, that could also be inspiring for him, because he's seen that that is a possible outcome that could happen along the way for him, and so he needs to keep on going. And with all the sort of mythical stuff going on here, it could be like there's a foretold traveller who is the one to overcome that challenge. There's a lot of possibilities, but ladies and gentlemen, join me next time for the finale of Journey.